The lights have gone out in Iran's most secret chambers. Not with a bang, but with a flicker. A cascade of failing systems. A symphony of error codes. This is not a power failure. This is a targeted takedown. A digital decapitation strike aimed at the very heart of the Islamic Republic's nuclear ambitions. Moments ago, United States Central Command, CENTM, shattered decades of covert protocol with a statement that has sent shockwaves from Washington to Tehran, from Moscow to Beijing. The statement, a terse and brutally direct confirmation, admits to a major offensive cyber operation executed by U.S. Cyber Command against Iran's nuclear infrastructure. This is not speculation. This is not a leak. This is a public declaration of a new kind of war. The operation, codenamed Digital Scythe, has reportedly crippled key elements of Iran's enrichment program, specifically targeting the advanced centrifuges at the Natanz and Fordo fuel enrichment plants. We are talking about a non-kinetic strike of unprecedented scale and audacity, one that has effectively slammed the brakes on Tehran's race for a breakout capability. The digital battlefield is no longer a theoretical concept. It is the front line. And tonight, the first major offensive of a new era has been launched and acknowledged. The immediate fallout is a deafening silence from Iran's most advanced nuclear facilities. The long-term consequences, however, will be anything but quiet. We are in uncharted territory. The rules of engagement are being rewritten in real time, in lines of malicious code. Let's break down the attack vector. Intelligence sources familiar with the operation speak of a multi-pronged assault, a textbook execution of the cyber kill chain. This was not a blunt instrument. It was a scalpel, wielded with devastating precision. The initial intrusion is believed to have exploited a zero-day vulnerability in the Siemens SCADA, supervisory control and data acquisition systems that manage Iran's centrifuge cascades. These SCADA systems are the central nervous system of any modern industrial facility. They control everything from spin rates and temperature thresholds to coolant flow and power distribution. Gaining access to them is the cyber equivalent of seizing the command deck of an aircraft carrier. The digital signatures of the malware payload, now being analyzed by allied intelligence agencies, point to a level of sophistication that few state actors can achieve. This was not a simple distributed denial of service attack. This was an advanced persistent threat, or APT, designed for one purpose: to infiltrate, to persist, and to dismantle from within. The malware appears to have laid dormant for weeks, possibly months, mapping the network architecture, identifying critical nodes, and awaiting the activation command from Cyberattack handlers. The payload itself is reportedly a masterpiece of destructive code. Analysts are calling it a direct descendant of Stuxnet, the infamous worm that physically damaged Iranian centrifuges over a decade ago, but exponentially more advanced. Unlike Stuxnet, which subtly manipulated spin speeds to cause physical degradation over time, Digital Scythe was engineered for a hard kill. The malware allegedly triggered emergency shutdown protocols in thousands of IR6 and IR4 centrifuges simultaneously, while simultaneously feeding false, all-clear telemetry back to the Iranian system operators. For a critical window of time, the engineers in Natanz would have seen green lights and normal readouts, while their multi-billion-dollar program was being systematically neutralized. It's the digital equivalent of flying blind into a mountainside. Furthermore, the attack wasn't limited to the centrifuges. Secondary payloads targeted the electrical substations and power grid infrastructure feeding the underground Fordo facility. This created a cascading failure, a strategic blackout designed not only to halt enrichment, but also to severely complicate and delay any attempt to reboot the systems. The attackers didn't just turn off the lights. They ripped out the wiring and destroyed the fuse box on their way out. This is a new doctrine of cyber warfare: crippling infrastructure to achieve a strategic objective without a single boot on the ground or a missile fired. It's clean, it's deniable, or at least it was, until CENTCOM's stunning confirmation. And that brings us to the most critical question: why now? Why admit to it? Publicly attributing a covert operation of this magnitude is a tectonic shift in U.S. strategic policy. For decades, operations like this were shrouded in plausible deniability. Acknowledging Digital Scythe is a deliberate act of coercive diplomacy. It's a message sent not just to Tehran, but to the entire world. The message is clear. Our reach is global, and our capabilities in the digital domain are unmatched. We can touch you, anywhere, anytime, without firing a shot. The Pentagon's official statement was carefully worded, describing the operation as defensive actions designed to degrade Iran's ability to further destabilize the region and threaten U.S. forces and interests. They are framing this not as an act of war, but as a preemptive counter-proliferation measure, a necessary step to prevent Iran from reaching the nuclear threshold, a point of no return that would fundamentally alter the balance of power in the Middle East. This confirmation serves multiple strategic purposes. First, it is a direct and unambiguous warning to Iran's leadership. It demonstrates a profound intelligence penetration into their most secure networks and a willingness to use these powerful new weapons. It forces Tehran to question the security of every single one of its critical systems, from its missile command and control to its economic infrastructure. The psychological impact cannot be overstated. Second, it's a signal to America's regional allies, particularly Israel and Saudi Arabia. It tells them that the United States is taking proactive, decisive measures to contain the Iranian threat, potentially placating calls from hardliners in Tel Aviv for more conventional military strikes. Washington is showcasing a powerful, less bloody alternative to a full-scale bombing campaign, an option that achieves similar results without the risk of a wider regional conflagration. Third, the public announcement puts immense pressure on Russia and China, who have been providing diplomatic and, in some cases, technological cover for Iran. By laying the attack bare, the U.S. is daring them to condemn an action aimed at preventing nuclear proliferation, a stated goal of all P5+1 nations. It complicates their narrative and forces them to react on a global stage. Iran's reaction, as expected, has been a whirlwind of confusion, denial, and fury. Initially, state-controlled media outlets reported a technical glitch, or industrial accident, at Natanz. The head of the Atomic Energy Organization of Iran, Mohammad Eslami, vehemently denied any cyberattack, calling the reports psychological warfare. But the CENTCOM confirmation made that position untenable. Within hours, the narrative shifted. Unnamed officials in the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, began leaking statements to semi-official news agencies, acknowledging a hostile act of cyber-sabotage by the Great Satan. The language escalated rapidly, with IRGC commanders vowing a crushing and regrettable response. The public admission by the U.S. has cornered the Iranian regime. To not respond would be a massive show of weakness, an unacceptable loss of face both domestically and regionally. To their proxies and allies across the TIS, axis of resistance, from Hezbollah in Lebanon to the Houthis in Yemen, Iranian inaction would be seen as a sign of impotence. So what are Tehran's options? They are standing at a dangerous crossroads, and every path carries immense risk. Option 1 is a symmetric response, a retaliatory cyber attack on the United States. Iran's cyber capabilities have grown significantly. While not on par with U.S. Cyber Command, they are far from trivial. They have a documented history of targeting U.S. financial institutions, dams, and municipal infrastructure. A major cyber attack on the U.S. mainland, however, would cross a red line that could trigger a devastating kinetic response from the Pentagon. It's a game of chicken that Iran's leadership, for all its bluster, may not be willing to play. They could opt for a less direct cyber assault, targeting a U.S. ally in the region, like Saudi Arabia's oil facilities or the UAE's port infrastructure, to send a message without directly confronting the United States. Option 2 is the more familiar asymmetric response, activating their proxies. We could see an uptick in drone and missile attacks by the Houthis against Saudi and Emirati targets. We could see increased rocket attacks by Iranian-backed militias against U.S. bases in Iraq and Syria. The most dangerous flashpoint, as always, is the Strait of Hormuz, through which a third of the world's seaborne oil passes. The IRGC Navy could harass or even attempt to seize commercial shipping, attempting to choke the global economy in retaliation. This is a well-worn page from their playbook, but in the current climate, any miscalculation, any accidental casualty, could be the spark that ignites the entire powder keg. Option 3 is a direct, but limited, military action, perhaps a ballistic missile strike against a symbolic but empty target, like a desert training base, similar to their response after the killing of Qasem Soleimani. This would allow them to claim they have retaliated for domestic consumption, while attempting to avoid a full-scale war. But the risk of escalation remains terrifyingly high. What if a U.S. service member is unintentionally killed? What if the missiles go astray? Finally, there is the diplomatic option. Iran will undoubtedly take its case to the United Nations, accusing the United States of an illegal act of aggression, a violation of its sovereignty. They will attempt to rally international condemnation, particularly from non-aligned nations, and paint themselves as the victim of American imperialism. This option, however, provides no immediate satisfaction for the hardliners in Tehran, baying for blood. The strategic calculus behind CENTCOM's decision to go public with Digital Scythe rests on the belief that Iran, crippled and exposed, will be forced to de-escalate, that this show of overwhelming, non-lethal force will compel them back to the negotiating table over their nuclear program, but this time from a position of profound weakness. The U.S. is betting that the Iranian regime values its own survival above all else, and that the fear of further, more devastating cyberattacks on its economy or conventional military will temper its response. But this is a high-stakes gamble. The regime in Tehran is not always a rational actor by Western standards. It is driven by a complex mix of revolutionary ideology, national pride, and factional infighting. The IRGC may see this as an existential threat that demands an overwhelming response, regardless of the consequences. A cornered animal is a dangerous one. Operation Digital Scythe has fundamentally changed the nature of this conflict. It has demonstrated that a nation's most vital, most heavily guarded assets can be neutralized without a single shot fired. A nuclear program, the pride of a nation and the product of billions of dollars of investment, was brought to its knees by a ghost in the machine. A silent, digital onslaught. The immediate crisis is over. The centrifuges are offline. But the true crisis is just beginning. The world now holds its breath, waiting for Tehran's answer. Every satellite, every signals intelligence operative, every diplomat is watching for the slightest indication of their next move. The blackout at Natanz has cast a long shadow, and what emerges from that darkness will define the geopolitical landscape for years to come. The digital Rubicon has been crossed. There is no going back. We've laid out the facts of the operation, the strategic confirmation, and the potential paths of escalation. This is a developing story, and we will be here, tracking every move. Make sure you are subscribed with notifications on, so you don't miss our urgent updates as this crisis unfolds. Breaking the Front is your essential briefing for this new era of conflict. Now we turn it over to you. The U.S. has demonstrated a powerful new capability to neutralize a nuclear program without kinetic force. But by making it public, they have forced Iran's hand, creating a massive risk of escalation. So the question is this: was the public confirmation of Operation Digital Scythe a masterstroke of coercive diplomacy that will prevent a war? Or was it a reckless gamble that has made a wider, more devastating conflict inevitable? Let us know your analysis in the comments below.